Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the HealthTech Beat podcast. The mission of our podcast is to show the real life challenges of implementing technology in healthcare. And the podcast is sponsored by Demigos, a company that develops IT solutions for healthcare startups and companies. My name is Ivan Dunsky, your host as always, and I am joined today by an honored guest, Shimizu. Yu is from Japan and her background is in applied mathematics in biomedical signal and image processing. You spent most of her career in research and currently you are the CTO at Aikomi, a company that develops digital tools to improve the quality of life for people with dementia and their families. Yu, thank you for joining today. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Cool. So, could you please tell us about Aikomi and how it helps people with them?
Yeah. So Aikomi is Japan-based startup, and we develop a web-based software, and it's delivered by a tablet, and it streams personalized content. And that content is specialized. It should trigger the communication between the person with dementia and the family or the carer, and it in that way improves the quality of life for the families and also the carers, which is for us an important point. So far, all the software, not all the software, but most of the software for dementia is focused on the person with dementia. We want to focus also on the families and the carers because many problems arise from this, what we call dementia triad, where families and person with dementia and care workers have to work together to improve the situation. And so essentially, we want to, with our software, we want to pinpoint the memories that are still alive in that person with dementia and the cognitive functions, and show the family that they can still communicate with this person, and through that find a connection back to the family members.
Based on memories.
Memories, but also cognitive functions. So the cognitive functions also decline. But from outside, of course, you cannot see which ones are still alive or which not, but you can trigger them delivering person-centered content. So we also have quizzes, for example, but with subjects that we know the person likes. We have an interview before starting the whole process with the family about the whole life story. And then through integration of an AI, we try to eventually pinpoint what keeps that person motivated.
Uh-huh. So do you do that kind of in an empirical way where you show images or things like that and observe the reaction of a patient?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I didn't explain that properly, but the person who is watching the tablet is recorded through the video camera on the tablet, and that video is processed by an AI to show what kind of reaction. So far, not which kind of emotion they show, because that's very difficult through an AI. At the moment, we try to keep it objective, but in the future it will be connected to subjective comments either from the family or from the carers who are with the person during the session.
Mm-hmm.
And in the next session, the AI should automatically select from a pool of contents that we already have something that's suitable for that person to continue the line of stimulus. So we actually call the videos stims, like stimuli. We don't call them content or video or picture.
And do you have evidence that this stimuli improve cognitive functions of patients?
It doesn't improve cognitive functions, but we can pinpoint what is still working. We don't have evidence in the sense of evaluated data yet. That's a work in progress. We have, of course, empirical data and experience on that. That's what started the whole process of making a company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we do talk a lot with the families also, but we also have a proper research study in preparation that we do in collaboration with care facility, where we'll go through the whole process of recruiting 30 to 50 people and then evaluate before and after the sessions, after using them 3 months. So usually people don't use the software every day or something. They use it every week. So it's a bit of a longer process.
Mm-hmm. So they have kind of sessions where they use tablet or phone and see different images, maybe sounds,
Yeah, exactly.
videos, right? That
Yeah,
is how it
exactly.
works. Got it.
So what we want to aim at is that the family member is also interested and says, "Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that about your life," or "I didn't know that you are interested in that," and that's where the communication comes alive. And the second point is they can upload their own images. So if they send us their personal data, we upload it and we make a story for them. So they can look at events like 20, 30 years ago and share that memory and kind of feel connected to that person anymore. Again, for the family, it's very difficult once the person starts having dementia to identify that person they knew. They mostly feel like, okay, they're losing that person, but it's actually not true. So characteristics are maintained.
What do you mean by characteristics are maintained?
If that person is inherently a positive person, because they have dementia, they don't become suddenly
Negative.
boring. But to you, it might seem like that because they lose their way to communicate. So Aikomi should provide that bridge to show the family that they still can maintain their personalities. Like people who make a lot of jokes, they still make jokes even if they have dementia. That type of characteristics. Yeah. People who are naturally quiet, they usually stay quiet. People who are naturally active, they become active. But some of the symptoms of dementia, they kind of overlay that character. Like quiet people can be very aggressive, but out of frustration. So if you can kind of alleviate a little bit of anxiety and the frustration, you can see their character come back. So that helps the family to kind of keep the quality of life.
Okay. And don't you think that if these sessions would be more often, the result would be better? I mean, if that would be not once a week, but for example, every day.
So that is something we are not sure about, and we don't want to push the families to do that.
I mean, not families, but patients.
Yeah, so that there we are not sure. We have to kind of do a proper research project on that. That will be one of the parameters that we can adjust. But from our experience, every day is usually too much burden on the caretaker. So that's a point that we find a little bit difficult, but which is a very important part of the whole business strategy also, to find the sweet point for the caretaker and the family and the person with dementia. We don't use the word patient. It's always person with dementia, because we believe that their symptoms come out of anxiety and frustration. And that's what we're trying to alleviate. We cannot fix the dementia itself. So we cannot revive functions that are already lost with this kind of software.
So a person with dementia cannot use the solution without a caretaker, right?
If if it's a very mild case, still they will be able. So we have a remote version also because of Corona, of course, that we developed just for Corona, but where the family can actually be at home and the person with dementia, if they live alone, they just have to switch on the tablet. The main aim is to make the family communicate. So we prefer if they are together.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, totally makes sense. Okay, and what differentiates Aikomi from other applications which help people with dementia?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's the main point of the business also. So business of the product, I would say, so we don't concentrate so much on the business. But one big difference is that it's person-centered. So most of the applications show general contents, general games. They're often group-orientated for the care homes, but we try to actually customize it to each person. And the customization works through AI. So many people ask us, okay, what's the difference to YouTube? But the difference is that we have our own content, of course, that's tailored for people with dementia. And also that's tailored to the personal content that the family gives us. So they can give us their own content and upload. And if they want, also create their own stories. So we have more flexibility on the creational side for the family also. And the second point is that we also want to concentrate on the quality of life for the families, because many problems come out of the family, not from the person themselves. So the family would like to look after the person with dementia, but they don't know how. And as you know, there is a shortage of therapists and also caretakers. So we want to provide the families with something they can use without having to do like a 1-year training or something, to kind of spend a good time with the family members.
So do you provide any kind of education or knowledge base to family members?
No, so we on purpose want the software to be self-educational. So maybe there can be some kind of training on how to communicate more efficient, but I think that's very different from family to family. So we have family, for example, who communicate just by sitting closer or sitting further apart. That's their way to communicate. We don't feel like there should be any training. We are planning to have training for people who are working care homes, because their relation to the person with dementia is a bit different than for family members. But it's still work in progress also. So if they need some prompts, we are planning to put them into the program, not into a training session. So they will have maybe a sentence that the family can use to start the conversation, instead of having to attend something before. So that we found that that's actually a burden for anybody who wants to try the software. If there is a training or if there's something complicated, then they tend not to use it.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think that is really a smart way to do it, because people, as you said, the family members already have burden and have some kind of difficulty, right? And so they're frustrated, and that's cool that you give a kind of plug and play way approach where they can use the product right away.
Yeah, it is actually also quite a challenge, because our users are between 40 and 60, sometimes 70. So any kind of technology is like, oh my god, it's like even switching the tablet on and things. So we try tailoring the software so that it's very intuitive is one of our challenges.
And is the product already live? So do you already have users?
Yes, but it's in pre-business trial, so it's already live, but we only have like 30 users at the moment. So based on that, we will change the business model.
30 persons with dementia.
Yeah, so 30 paying customers. We have more people on the research side. Yeah.
Got it. Cool. And what results do you receive so far? Like, how do you measure outcomes?
So we look at how long do people continue using it, of course, and then what kind of feedback we receive on the videos. We found something interesting, that people tend not to continue using it if you don't check in with them. And which is one of our purposes. So the family feels more comfortable using the device if they can call you once a week and say, oh, this session went well, this session didn't go well, even though we don't advise them. But that's the type of service actually that we also would like to provide. A person who is familiar with problems in the family, if they have a person with dementia, who can listen to them and not advise them, but be a communication partner for them. So it will be integrated as part of our service. It's not a therapist, but it's somebody who is well versed in that area. For example, our care director, she's a social worker who has a lot of experience with families like that.
Yeah, that's cool. Could you please tell us about the product development side of things? What do you do at the company right now on the product development side, and what is your current focus?
So I'm in charge of connecting everything together and make it a functional thing on the web platform. So I try to pinpoint what's needed on the business side, what's needed on the user side, what's needed on the care side, and translate it into functions on the platform, but also into other applications if that's possible. So I'm also responsible for web page. For example, we have a line for customers. Anything that can be kind of solved by technology, I'm in charge of kind of coming up with that idea. Of course, I talk to my team with that. I'm responsible to communicate the needs of the projects to the tech team and figure out their workload, manage the roadmap, and manage the priorities. One of the tasks that are nearly finished is to support the team to become a real team, because we had an outsourced team before and we had to change to an in-house team. But because we started with being only 4 people 2 years ago, we had to start from the first person in the tech team and now we have 6. So it took quite a while to kind of get everybody into the place they feel comfortable with and feel also the whole process of developing.
Could you tell please about the experience of working with the outsourced team? So I assume that your technology is quite complex. I mean, there is of course like some standard parts of it, but there is also that AI piece. So could you tell us about like the whole life cycle? What was the approach to develop the product from scratch, and like how it evolves to the current state?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky that the outsourced team is actually a team that works for our collaborating company. So we have a collaboration company that's called SPX, and they have their own team, and we outsource to them. So the process was not like a usual outsourcing where you have the whole spec and then you just give it to the outsourcing team, but it was like a joint management. So on my side, there was me, but they had their own manager, of course. So lucky me, I didn't have to kind of know everything about what they're doing, but just tell them the needs. And then as the business changes also, of course, in the beginning, try to figure out how to do that. So they had the proof of concept, the base was outsourced, and then it was taken over by our in-house, slowly by our in-house developers. The AI is still outsourced to the same company and is connected through an API. And we continue the same process. So we continue collaborating in the sense of that we have weekly or bi-weekly meetings where we talk about how their process is and how it should be integrated in our side. So now it's completely separated into the Aikomi team is in charge of the technology in the sense of the software, and the AI team is in charge of developing the AI and then connecting it through the API. So now it's like two separate. There's like software development, and one is technology in the sense of developing the algorithm.
Mm-hmm. So they do all the models. They do
the models and the data analysis. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
That's where my expertise mainly comes in. So the data analysis and the machine learning, right? Because my background is not in software development.
Could you tell us how you manage the team? Like when you manage the AI team, like what kind of your approach to manage them? How do you overview if everything is going into right direction? Like maybe some KPIs, or like how do you do that?
So for the AI team, they have their own manager, of course, also because they are from our collaborating company. So they have their management also. But from our side, we are connected by Slack, and we communicate about everything they need access to. If they need some API, then our team will take care of that. If we need them to configure something so that it actually can be integrated in our platform, then we communicate that mostly about in Slack. My role is more to keep the overview on what's missing, what's not missing, because the developers are very focused on their own thing. So it's not possible, I think, for them to at the same time look at the roadmap. And the AI has, in the sense, no hard deadline, but the technology side does. So I'm also in charge of balancing these two things.
Mm-hmm.
So my role is more on the Aikomi tech team, of course.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Even though I'm not a software developer,
but again, how you overview the results of the AI team? How you check that everything is?
They give us a bi-weekly report.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give us also a knowledge transfer seminar. We have knowledge transfer meetings. They explain in detail how the system is built, so that our technicians can take it over.
Got it.
So the delivery is maybe that bi-weekly. So we don't have like we have milestones, of course. So we check on that, of course, but it depends also on what the data brings. So sometimes we don't get the results that we want, and then we have to change things.
Mm-hmm.
But mainly for the outsourced, we have bi-weekly meetings, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
And
and I'm also directly in touch with the manager on their side. So if anything is about changing in their team, then we communicate directly.
yeah, and there is a thought that AI is a kind of a black box and it can generate kind of unpredicted results. So
Yes.
could you share with us, like, if you have already observed some unpredicted results from your AI?
Unpredicted results. Yes. So it's very heavily dependent on the training data, of course. And because we don't have enough data on our side yet, we use training data that's freely available also. So there is definitely a bias. I mean, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say that, but we trained also previously an AI that is supposed to tag what's in the picture. Is a very common problem. But we use it for Asian people, right? And the first time I uploaded an Asian person, it would say bear. So that's completely, and you can tell, okay, this must have been trained on white people probably, right? So these are kind of things we have to be careful about, I think. And also the training on the emotional part. So we try to streamline the training data a bit so that there won't be any mistakes like that.
Yeah, like just a similar example. We did a project where we analyzed the queue of people in front of post offices, and
Right.
we also built a face recognition algorithm to do that. And when we tried on Asian people, that was like things like that, like you explained. So it didn't recognize Asian people, but
Yeah, right.
it did good job with the European people. But yeah, it was completely disaster with Asia.
So yeah, I think one big part of our project is also to customize the AIs to specific data, because people with dementia, for example, they don't show their emotion that clearly in the face. So even if we have a good emotion detector for face, but we have to retrain it on people with dementia, because even if they say, okay, I'm very happy, you would maybe not be able to tell it. So that's where the main part of the AI goes into, I think.
But in general, what is your strategy of like solving this problem of getting more data? Because I think like more data you have, more accurate the algorithm is, right? So what is your strategy in that? Open data is not enough, right?
Is not enough. So we use a lot of transfer learning. We try to find as much as open data and then adjust it to what we have. But we use, of course, also the data we already get from the clients. And then we have friends. We ask friends to record videos. So it's still not enough, but we are not planning to have big data in that sense, because it's per person. So there should be a constant update. For each person, we won't have that much data anyway. So we will have to find a different solution than a huge amount of data.
So you are saying that algorithm works only with the data of a specific person.
Yes.
So it doesn't build correlations with other people.
In the future, yes. So we try to make it in parts. So it will build correlations once we have more customers.
Do you think that is the right thing to build correlations? It is like two sides of the coin, right? There's the flip side that it can be biased. So you can think that there is a correlation, but in reality there is no correlation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's very true. So I think it would be a good starter for retraining the model. So essentially, if there is a person we need to adjust in the future, now we're not doing it, but in the future, ideally, there should be a feedback loop. And if we can bring that first model as close as possible to the end point, so to say. So if we can bring the start point as close as possible to the end point, that's of course better for the model. So if there is a correlation, you can try to use that as a seed. But then many possibilities at the moment. We're not sure what's the best, like always. But I think it's good to use as a startup.
Great. Yeah, and could you tell me, please, about the kind of your distribution strategy? So, as I understood, you are focusing on the Japanese market right now, right? So,
Yes.
what are your plans on going on other markets?
So we need to establish the Japanese market first, because we don't have enough people at the moment, but also because it's very culture dependent. So any contents we stream is, because it's person centered, is also very culture centered. So all the festivals are now Japanese related, even within Japan, because it's so long. We have different seasons, different vegetation, different festivals. So once we have that established, we want to, of course, go abroad. We already have a collaboration with a care homeowner in the United States and the feasibility project running. So they will provide contents, and we will see what the first trial will show, how much different the content has to be. And also the stimuli, they have to be presented in a different way, probably. I mean, especially if you compare Japan and America, the way we present things is completely different. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? Like, how different? In what way?
I think Japanese content is more subtle. One thing that came up is, for example, the American care home. They have a similar application to Aikomi, but it's not person-centered. But they have a lot of discussion topics. In Japan, we don't discuss so many things. So if you would ask, what do you think about this, you will get less feedback than if you give them a choice, for example. Or emotional reactions are a bit, I think, more contained. So that would affect, for example, also the AI, the emotional, the face recognition and things. So these parts need to be adjusted, which is more work than most people think, actually. So you will have to adjust whatever we stream, and then you have to adjust the AI.
That is what you mentioned, that to put it in different words, that as like course taking into consideration the kind of closed culture, you don't really know if a person really means what they show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're trying to also keep a connection to Singapore, because we have some connection there. That will be maybe easier because there are also many Asian people. And another thing is, we try to find Asian people who live abroad as users to start with.
By Asian, you mean Chinese as well?
Yeah.
And do you see similarities between how the product could be applied in Japan and in China?
Not in terms of content, but in terms of AI.
What do
So
you mean? Not in terms of content. What do you mean?
So in content, we will have to change everything to Chinese events, Chinese festivals, Chinese iconic
Okay, got it.
music, everything. So content is, I think, the biggest part, actually. Also, because of the copyright, it was not so easy to kind of gather all this content. You have to search for it, and then if it's perfect, sometimes it's copyright and you can't actually get it.
But as I understood, the majority of content is provided by persons with dementia and their families.
Depends on how many images they have themselves. So a lot of content is also provided by us. So the base content should be provided by us, because if there is a person who doesn't have any images or does not use smartphones, or where you can easily get
Instagram.
Yeah. So the target population is like 40 to 60, right? So, and at least in Japan, many of the customers we have are in the 80s and 90s. So they don't really have pictures of themselves. So we need to kind of find them. It's kind of a quest, Aikomi quest, also, to find pictures for these people from somewhere, from the past.
So basically, they tell you a story that, for example, I was there, and then you put together the content images.
Exactly. So the first time before the users, we have an interview with the family, and they tell us the life story, more or less, of that person. And we try to find contents about that person. So ideally that should be automatic. It's semi-automatic at the moment, so we use tags to do that, but in the future it should be completely automatic.
How it could be completely automatic? Will you parse? Will you search for images online?
Yeah, online. So ideally it should all be in our package. It should not be online. It should be on part of the Aikomi service. We will have all these contents ready at the time we deliver.
So you mean that the person need to provide the content to you, or what? Like how you can gather all the content automatically?
So we have a pool of contents already. So we're still in the process.
Okay, so you just repurpose the content.
Yeah. So that's also a little bit to your question, if we can find correlations. But we will try to find, of course, age. If you see in the profile, same age, the same hometown, then we already know what kind of contents they will maybe like. So we start from there, and then the rest is feedback.
Got it. And coming back to the kind of in-house versus outsource approach question. So what kind of pros and cons do you find in those two ways? And why did you end up with the approach of going more towards in-house?
Right. So outsource, of course, there's always a hard deadline. And it's much more budget related than in-house, because in-house is continuous salary. And the communication, of course, works much better in-house. Even though we are all remote because of Corona these days, it is much more easy to convey what is needed and for whatever reason, because they are familiar also with our business model. The in-house people, they, of course, know what the situation is regarding of what we aim to, while the outsourced people, they only get, okay, we need this. We don't have as much time to, of course, we talk about the business also, or the needs that the care people have, to make it more transparent to them why we need certain functions, but we don't have that much time. And the in-house people, they inherently, they get this introduction to the whole company philosophy, to our aims and our vision. Yeah, it's more transparent for them. Their motivation is different, I think, than outsourced people.
You plan to continue development more in the in-house approach as the product grows?
Yes, except for the AI, I think everything will be in-house.
Got it. Yeah, could you share with us the scaling plans of Aikomi? Do you have a roadmap, for example, when you go to the US market, and like what do you need to accomplish to get there? Just a general roadmap.
So we are now in Series A. That means we have to, until the end of fiscal year 2023, we have to show that we have a business model that works. And then we go into Series B, which is scaling, right? So I think we already have prepared the connections to different countries, but realistically, we can only start thinking about going abroad in maybe 2-3 years. Because we have to still grow our team, and we have to still grow our marketing team also, including the marketing team. Somebody has to do the communication. We will need, if we go abroad, we will need translators. Maybe not so many, but yeah. It's still a bit further away, I think, going abroad. But we are counting on that, actually.
Yeah, sure. I think there is kind of a global, as we all see, the global shortage of nurses and caretakers. And I constantly speak with people from the US, and there is a huge problem there as well. As society also getting older in developed countries. So I think that is a huge problem. And
I think in that sense, it's in Japan, the need is maybe much higher than in other countries yet, but other countries are watching, because Japan is the first country where there's like a huge amount of old people, and society is going that way because healthcare system is getting better and people live longer. So I think everybody is watching Japan, how they're going to handle this problem. So it's a difficult place to start, but also a good place, I think, for a software like ours. The motivation is definitely there.
You previously worked at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, and you have some materials on the ResearchGate platform. Could you please tell us about the most interesting project, if you can share that?
Right. The most interesting project is, so I worked on two big projects. One is in pinpointing biomarkers in the brain for depression, and the other one is completely different. It's both, I did both of them about 2.5 years, but the other one is in sustainable living architecture. And what I can say is that both of them were interesting in the way that it took me very close to a real situation, in the sense that they are both topics that impact the society immediately at the moment in a very, very big way. And whatever we do as a researcher in that field can equally impact the society immediately. So that was my first experience. In research, you do, of course, something that's useful, but you're often not so close to, even in applied mathematics, you're not so close to something.
To implementation.
Yeah, right. So it took me very close. I mean, the last step was done by going to Aikomi. I mean, still, and if you're in research, you can't see the last step where it gets implemented at some point. But you're very close. So I had the possibility to work with the therapists, the psychiatrists in the dementia, in the depression projects, and also, on the sustainable living side, I had the opportunity to collaborate with all the companies that install solar panels. What kind of problems are there? Yeah, wind energy. What is the problem? What is the problem in Okinawa? Why is not everybody using a solar panel? So all these things that in your daily life you think like, oh, that's important, but why is it not working? I got the chance to actually get the answer to that by actually talking to people who directly work with this problem. So that was, I think, a big change also for me in the way I do research.
And yeah, I think that is great background to what you are doing now.
Yeah, exactly. So especially in the sustainability project, that was the first time I got to manage the project myself. So that gave me the skills that I needed for Aikomi. And also I had this collaborations with the companies that provide the hardware. So that was my first experience also with hardware, because I'm a data scientist. I don't need to care about hardware. And I also got my first experience about software development there.
Cool. Yeah, we are coming to the end of the interview, and I would like to get your opinion on the question, like, what do you think it is important to become a good skilled engineering manager? What kind of advice you can give to people who want to switch, for example, from scientific jobs or from engineering jobs to engineering managers jobs?
Right. So if the people want to switch, then they should try and do some management, any kind of management, like organizing an event, or just leading a group of kids in soccer, just to see what management is like, and maybe talk to other managers what that job actually concerns. And then as a manager, I would say the most important thing is to know your team. So to know what they need from you, and to know what motivates them to do actually what they need to do. And if they start being able to do that, the routine themselves, then I think it's important to step back a little bit so they can have ownership and control over their own process. So I think too much management is maybe too much. Yeah. So this balance is, I think, very important. You have to know your people. It's not just about getting the things done.
But if you have a lot of people, how you can know all of them? Like, what is?
Yeah, then you have to have maybe more managers. That's true. If you have more people, I mean, I have maybe now the maximum I can know is like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
That's true. So we already start having groups within. Yeah, because we're small, actually, we try to figure out who is comfortable doing what, or who, even if they're maybe not the best in this one, if they want to challenge it, then I let them usually do it, because that's important for their career development also. But I agree with you that once the company has like 100, 200 employees, everything is different, of course. That there's no way, there's a different management style.
Yeah, I appreciate that advice. I also agree on that there is not any like silver bullet you can use. You need really to know what is happening specifically with your people. There is no some kind of checklist that you can follow and everything would be fine. Yeah, I'd like to end our interview and ask several personal questions, if you don't mind. There is just short questions, and you can answer whatever you come up with. So I'm wondering, have you been to the restaurant? I don't know if I pronounced this right. Sukiyabashi Zero, a chef Zero Ono in Tokyo.
No,
No, have you heard about that?
no.
No.
Sukiya
Yeah, it's so I saw a movie. It's called Dreams of Zero. So that is about that
sushi.
is about the sushi chef Zero Ono. That is the first sushi restaurant that received Michelin stars, 3 Michelin stars.
Right.
Yeah, and that is quite famous. And
Fantastic. Okay, I will check this next time. Okay, let me see.
yeah, it's in Tokyo. If a restaurant has 3 stars, there is incentive to go to that specific country just to visit that restaurant.
Yeah, there is. You're right. You should come.
Yeah. I'd love to. And could you please tell us what is the location that impressed you the most in Japan?
The location. So I'm a very nature-bound person. That's why I'm in Okinawa. But the place I like the best is an island just below the main island of Japan. It's called Yakushima. It's now a national heritage, and it's do you know Miyazaki Hayao? He made a Princess Mononoke movie.
No.
But so anyway, that place is really, really beautiful. So because when it's a volcano that's not active anymore, but when you start do the crossover, the scenery changes all the time. So that's really beautiful. Everything is moss and green, and you have the deers with the monkeys on top. So that's one scene in that movie actually with Miyazaki Hayao. There is a deer with a monkey, and when you go there, you can actually see them.
There is a famous anime creator, right?
Yeah, I think you will know it. Mononoke. It's called Princess Mononoke. I'm sure you have heard that
I
somewhere.
think that I saw other animes of him.
So the forest that he pictures in these movies is always based on that forest. And everybody told me it's like paradise, and I thought, what's like paradise? But when you go there, it's really the beauty. I think is in the changing environment. The whole scenery always changes. You have rocks, and when you go to the top, you have this short bamboo grass, and then you can see over the whole sea. And when you go down, you have different more with water, and then you have the rivers. It changes all the time. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I assume there are many beautiful places in Japan.
Yeah, there.
And what is the piece of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
That's a tricky one, but maybe to be more self-confident and give things a chance. I think I was not thinking too much by myself. I was just think that when you go to school, you just believe what, I mean, at least me. It took me a long time to get out of this. What people tell you is what's true. But I realized later that that's actually completely not true. So what you learn should just be the starter for your thoughts. But I took it as just that's my thoughts. I think if I have another chance, I would like to be more open-minded from the beginning.
And I'm just curious, do you think that is also a part of the culture? Because I think that the Western culture is like more individualistic.
Maybe, but I grew up in Europe actually.
In Europe, okay.
Yeah, I grew up in Vienna, and I went to local school. So it is, but you're right, it is also culture related. So in Japan, we mostly are educated to believe what your parents tell you. So which is also okay. There should be a nice in between. So yeah, but considering that I grew up in Europe, I should be more open-minded, I think.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think that is the perfect way to end today's interview. Thank you for your time and for sharing insights, of course, about Aikomi and your approach of helping people with dementia and their families, as well as how you manage the product development, having two teams in-house and outsourcing teams. Thank you. But before we finish, what is the best way to get in touch with you so that people can write you?
Oh yeah, LinkedIn, I think.
Yeah, that would be also in our resources section.
Right.
Thank you, thank you, listeners, and we will catch up in next episodes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. See you.